everyone! Welcome back to the Speak English podcast. I'm Emmy.
And I'm Joe. We're so glad you're tuning in for another exciting episode. Today's topic is all about common mistakes in English that even native speakers make. Yes, it's true. We'll take a closer look at these mistakes, why they happen, and how to fix them.
That's right. You'd be surprised at how often native speakers slip up, especially in casual conversation or when they're in a rush. But don't worry, you're not alone. Whether you're learning English or just want to fine-tune your skills, being aware of these errors is a great way to improve.
Exactly, English is tricky, even for those who've spoken it their whole lives. Today, we'll break down some of the most common mistakes, give you the correct versions, and explain why those mistakes happen. The goal is for you to leave this episode more confident when speaking and writing.
And if that's not enough, we've got a special treat. Lili will be joining us later with a detailed vocabulary breakdown. We'll go over the important words and phrases from today's episode so you can remember them easily.
So, if you're ready to learn and laugh with us, let's jump in.
Okay, first up, double negatives. This is one of those mistakes that even native speakers tend to make, especially in informal conversations.
That's right, a double negative happens when you use two negative words in a sentence. It's something that sounds okay in speech but is grammatically incorrect. For example, I don't need no help.
Now, you might be thinking, that's just how people talk, right? And yes, it's common in certain dialects, but in standard English, it's actually wrong. The problem here is that when you use two negative words, like don't and no, it creates a positive meaning, which is confusing.
Exactly. So the correct version would be, I don't need any help. Notice how we swapped out no for any. This way, the sentence stays negative, which is what we want.
A good rule of thumb is, when you use don't, doesn't, or didn't, you should not follow it with no or any other negative word. Instead, use any or other words that don't create a double negative.
Next, let's dive into the difference between less and fewer. This is another mistake that many people make, even those who speak English fluently.
It's one of those things that seems confusing because they both refer to a smaller amount of something. But here's the catch. Fewer is used for things you can count, while less is used for things you can't count.
Let's break it down. For example, you would say, there are fewer people in the room today because people is countable. You can count them one by one.
Right. But if you're talking about something you can't count, like water, time, or sugar, you'd use less. So you would say, I have less time than you. Time is something that can't be counted individually, so less is the correct word here.
The key to getting this right is to ask yourself, can I count these things? If yes, use fewer. If not, use less.
This next mistake is one that makes people cringe when they see it in writing. Confusing your...
It seems simple, but they sound the same, which leads to a lot of confusion. Let's clear this up. Your is a possessive pronoun. It shows ownership. For example, your jacket is on the chair.
On the other hand, your is a contraction for you are. It's used when you're describing something about the subject. For example, you're going to love this movie.
A lot of people mistakenly write your when they should be using your, and it totally changes the meaning of the sentence. For example, you're going to love this movie is wrong. It should be you're going to love this movie.
The trick here is simple. If you can replace the word with you are, and it still makes sense, use your. If it shows possession, use your.
This one's a little tricky, using commas incorrectly in compound sentences. A compound sentence is a sentence made up of two independent clauses joined by a conjunction like and, but, or so.
For example, I want to go for a walk, but it's raining outside. You might be tempted to put a comma between walk and but that's not quite right. The sentence is short, and there's no need for a comma there.
The rule is simple. You only need a comma if both parts of the sentence are independent clauses. In this case, you could say, I want to go for a walk, but it's raining outside because both parts of the sentence can stand alone.
But if you're joining a short sentence like I want to go for a walk but it's raining, No comma is necessary. Just be sure to watch out for longer sentences where the clauses are more independent.
Now, let's talk about a phrase that's used all the time, but it's actually incorrect. I could care less.
This one is used by many native speakers, and it's totally understandable. The problem is, if you say I could care less, it actually means that you still care a little bit, which is the opposite of what you're trying to say.
The correct expression is I couldn't care less. This means you don't care at all. There's no way you could care less. It's a great way to express complete indifference.
So, the next time you hear someone say I could care less, kindly remind them of the correct version. I couldn't care less.
Here's another common mistake. Mixing up me and I. This one is tricky because we use both in different ways.
The key difference is that I is the subject of a sentence, and me is the object. For example, you say, I went to the store because I is the subject. But if you're talking about yourself as the object of the action, you say she gave the book to me.
A common mistake is using me when it should be I, especially in sentences like, me and my friends are going to the movies. The correct version is my friends and I are going to the movies. Remember, I is used for subjects, and me is for objects.
This next mistake comes up when people confuse can and may. They both refer to ability or permission, but they're used differently.
Can is used when talking about ability. For example, I can swim means that you have the ability to swim.
May, on the other hand, is used for permission. For example, may I go to the bathroom? Is asking for permission, not talking about your ability to go to the bathroom.
It's a subtle difference, but important. So remember can for ability and may for permission. Another common confusion is between lay and li. These two verbs are often mixed up, even by native speakers.
The difference is simple. Once you understand it, lay is a transitive verb, which means it needs an object. For example, I will lay the book on the table. You're putting the book somewhere.
On the other hand, lie is an intransitive verb, meaning it doesn't need an object. For example, I will lie down on the bed. You're simply reclining yourself. No object involved.
So, remember? You lay something down, but you lie down yourself.
This is another one that trips people up. Should've versus should have.
Should've is a common mistake because it sounds like should've, but it's incorrect. The right phrase is should have.
For example, you should say, I should have studied more, not I should have studied more.
So, when in doubt, remember, should have, not should have.
And last but not least, we have between versus, among, both refer to location or position, but there's a difference in how they're used.
Between is used when talking about two or more distinct things, like the ball is between the two chairs.
Among is used when something is in the middle of a group, but the exact positions aren't important. For example, the ball is among the chairs means it's somewhere in the group of chairs.
So, remember, use between four distinct items and among four groups.
Hey, it's Lili. Time for your vocabulary breakdown. Let's take a closer look at some of the key terms from today's episode. First, we talked about double negatives. This is when you use two negative words, like don't and no in a sentence, which can confuse the meaning. Instead, use only one negative word, like don't need any help. Next, we had fewer and less. Remember, fewer is for things you can count, like people, books, or cars. Less is for things you can't count, like water, time, or money. We also covered your show's possession, like your jacket is on the chair, while your is a contraction of you are, like you're going to love this movie. Let's not forget compound sentences. A compound sentence is a sentence made up of two independent clauses joined by words like but, and, or so. Remember to use commas correctly when these clauses are independent. Then there's indifference. Indifference is the state of not caring about something at all, as in, I couldn't care less. It's when you feel like something is unimportant or irrelevant to you. Also, the word correct comes up a lot in today's episode. When something is correct, it means it's accurate or free from mistakes. For example, the correct sentence is, I don't need any help, not, I don't need no help. Finally, we talked about contractions. A contraction is a shortened version of a word or group of words, where an apostrophe replaces missing letters. For example, I'm is a contraction of I am, and your is a contraction of you are. I hope that helps. Now back to Emmy and Joe.
Thanks, Lili, for that fantastic breakdown. That was a lot of great info to help everyone master these common mistakes.
Definitely, we hope that by pointing out these common errors and explaining why they happen, you can avoid them in the future and sound even more natural when speaking English.
Thanks for listening to today's episode, everyone. We hope you found it helpful. If you liked this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave us a review. We love hearing from you.
Absolutely, and if you've got any questions or need more clarification, feel free to reach out to us on social media. We're always happy to help.
And speaking of next time, Joe, what's in store for our listeners?
I'm excited to talk about the next episode. We'll be discussing something a lot of people struggle with, understanding English perfectly, but not being able to speak it confidently.
That's such a common issue. We'll dive into why this happens, and more importantly, we'll give you practical tips on how to overcome this challenge and start speaking more confidently, even if you understand English well.
Exactly, we'll share strategies for improving your speaking skills, building your confidence, and getting past the fear of speaking. If you've ever felt like you can understand everything but freeze up when it's time to talk, this episode is for you.
So, don't miss it. We'll help you bridge the gap between understanding English and speaking it fluently.
Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Speak English podcast.